Hey everyone, it's Jaeyoung, and this is the Overwatch patch 1.30 overview. As usual, click on the link down below if you'd like to view the shorter rundown video, otherwise, let's get to it. This patch might as well be called the shotgun patch because both Roadhog and Reaper have received buffs, particularly Roadhog, so let's start with the big boy first. Firstly, Roadhog's chain hook has received significant quality of life buffs. There is now a decreased delay before pulling in a hook target towards yourself, down to 0.3 seconds from 0.5 seconds. Also, the hook now greatly reduces the target's momentum upon being hooked. The hook's cooldown also now begins immediately instead of after the target has been pulled towards you. These hook changes are absolutely welcome as the supposed one-man apocalypse has been having a pretty difficult time living up to his namesake. So one of the biggest issues with Roadhog previously was just how inconsistent his hook acted. Throughout various patches, it ran from a hook that could grab you from across 15 dimensions to a weak fishing line that broke at the most random times. So these changes bring a lot more consistency to the hook, and boy, is consistency something that Roadhog really needs. The decreased hook delay plus momentum reduction on this patch will certainly help Roadhog more consistently gain value out of the ability. Because previously, sometimes hooking a moving target would result in the target continuing to move before being pulled in, giving them a small kind of window of time to get behind a cover or object that results in a chain breaking. So now that window of time to escape has been reduced greatly, particularly with the reduction of the hook target's momentum, stopping them from getting behind cover successfully. The change to the hook cooldown is a great quality of life buff as well. Previously, the cooldown of the hook was dependent on the return of the hook to Roadhog. The time for the hook to return would vary depending on the distance traveled, of course. So now there's a constant number starting once the abilities button is pressed. And at long last, we see some changes to the spread on Roadhog's scrap gun. While it isn't a flat-out literal change to his damage numbers, it is still very much a buff to how he distributes his damage. So how this change works is that the scrap pattern from both his primary and secondary fire has been changed by moving more scrap pellets from the outside of the pattern towards the center of the shot. What this does is it concentrates the damage of his shots in the center as opposed to having it evenly spread out. Just like how you want your shots to land on a target with a bullseye on it. So that means more scrap being buried into your intended target as opposed to flying past them, which is great. Additionally, having his spread randomization reduced by 50% helps a lot with shot consistency as well. In case you're not familiar with what spread randomization is, it pretty much refers to how the pellets in each shot come out every time. For example, one shot might have a bit more pellets closer to the center of the shot, and the next shot might have more pellets closer to the outer rim of the shot. So it pretty much literally comes down to luck how these pellets come out every shot, which is why reduced randomization is a great addition for shot consistency. Lastly, his whole hog has been tweaked slightly, with the maximum knockback velocity being increased by 25% from 8 to 10 meters per second. Also adding on to this, the initial momentum burst whole hog used to have that could send targets flying to the moon was apparently considered a bug and has since been fixed. So while the knockback velocity has been increased, the initial launching power of the whole hog has been removed. It was already somewhat harder to shred enemies with high HP using whole hog after hooking them in, as they could pretty much just ride the momentum of the whole hog out of its effective range. But now there's a bigger window of time to deal damage before they're knocked away by the increased velocity. All in all, these changes are an overall significant buff to Roadhog, who might finally be able to look more like a one-man apocalypse again. But the burning question is, will he become as viable and off-tank as D.Va or Zarya in this current meta? It's hard to tell and probably not very likely. However, it is a decent step in the right direction for beefing him back up. Anyway, another shotgun hero in the shape of Reaper has also received some buffs this patch. His spread pattern has also been adjusted, bringing in more pellets from the outer ring of his shot into the middle ring. This adjustment also reduces the amount of empty space between rings when firing from further distances. And of course, just like Roadhog, the shotguns have had their spread randomization reduced by 50% as well. If you remember what that meant when I was talking about Roadhog, you'll know that reduced randomization is always a good thing. Despite how lethal Reaper can be at close range, the previous spread distribution and randomization sometimes makes every shot feel like the roll of a dice. Similar to Roadhog, the changes to Reaper's shotguns will now make them feel a lot more consistent and satisfying to use. Additionally, his passive, the Reaping, has also received a buff, upping the lifesteal from 20% to 30%. Remember, this lifesteal doesn't only apply to shooting, it works for any form of damage dealt by Reaper. His Daft Blossom deals 170 damage per second to each target, so that ends up healing Reaper for 51 health per second, the equivalent to a Mercy heal beam. That might sound scary on paper and it'll only be multiplied by increased number of targets. However, a Reaper Death Blossoming isn't as concerned about out-healing damage as he is avoiding being interrupted. You're still going to have to watch out for the shield bashes, flashbangs and all. However, a buff's a buff, and this is certainly one of them. Moving on from the two shotgun heroes, Symetra makes her way into the buff list as well, with her primary fire beam charging up 20% faster than before. Despite having its range increased, her beam remains somewhat underwhelming. Often players would find themselves barely charging up the beam to its max level before having to reload almost immediately after, wasting some valuable max charge time. Thus, other than close range shield breaking or cleaning up a one fight, players opted for her alternate fire energy balls instead. A 20% increase in charge rate is decent, but it's hard to tell if this change will make her beam significantly more viable outside the aforementioned situations. Oh, and a bug was fixed that stopped players from charging up her beam on an enemy maze ice wall. You can now charge up your beam on ice walls again, so that's pretty neat. And after numerous nerfs over the past few months, with the most recent being the nerf to her healing, Mercy has received a buff this patch. Her Valkyrie form now reverts her healing output back to its previous value of 60 healing per second, up from 50. The cost of charging up her Valkyrie has also been reduced by 15%, allowing players to have Valkyrie at the ready more frequently. Support ultimates have always been some of the most powerful throughout all the different metas in the game's history. At one point in time, Valkyrie was considered the strongest and most impactful ultimate in the game. The recent nerf to Mercy's healing also hit her healing while in Valkyrie form, which ended up making it feel like a very underwhelming ultimate ability. Buffing up her healing while in Valkyrie and decreasing its charge cost is a nice way to nudge her back in viability, especially at the higher ranks. The reworked Pharah could always use her fellow Mercy. The last change I'm going to talk about for this patch might not seem like a big deal at first, but it's possibly quite a big change. Jump height has now been made consistent across the hero roster. As of this recording, these patch notes are still from the PTR and there are no further developer comments clarifying these changes. Put simply, all heroes should have a more similar if not identical jump height. From what I gather, this means that heroes that previously could jump a little higher than average using just the base jump action now jump a little less high. And conversely, heroes that jumped a little lower than average now jump a little higher. I'm not quite sure what the middle point is for this patch, but it does change up how all heroes can traverse maps in certain situations. Players of heroes like Tracer that relied on certain jumps coupled with her blinks to get to areas might find themselves a little confused due to not being able to reach certain spots previously within reach. In all likelihood, there's probably dozens of spots across all the maps in the game that might be affected by this. This isn't really a change with an impact that will be felt overnight or even over a week. I have a feeling players will still be feeling a little thrown off by this change for weeks to come. And of course, we have our new hero Ashe, who I'll be releasing a separate video for hopefully by around today, so stay tuned. Anyway, that's it for this patch. Thanks everyone for watching, and I really appreciate the reception to the previous video. I'll try to keep the quality up in future videos. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it. You know, the usual. Take care everyone.